When people don't have the freedom to believe what they want around the world, it's a life and death reality for them. And we live in a society where we have so much freedom that we've inherited from our founding fathers that fought hard for it, and we can't give that up. So around the world, I've been helping fight for people to have those same freedoms. I'm Tina Ramirez. I run an international organization that defends religious liberty around the world. This is a freedom that I've fought for over 20 years. I also happen to be running for the U.S. Congress in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. For the last 20 years, I've spent the majority of my career fighting for religious freedom in about 30 different countries. I've seen firsthand what happens when the government takes the rights and needs of its citizens for granted. So I'd love to share with you a little bit about my work in Iraq. About 5 years ago, when ISIS had come in to northern Iraq, they gave the Christian community there about 48 hours notice to pack up and go, or to be forced to convert to Islam or be killed. In the other parts of northern Iraq, where the Yazidis were, they gave them no notice. They simply slaughtered all of the men, lined 18 mass graves with their bodies, and then took about 6,000 young girls and used them as sex slaves. And this is the reality in Iraq 5 or 6 years ago. About 600,000 children living in Mosul were forced to be brainwashed by the group's ideology and really were educated to be terrorists, to hate and kill other people. The government didn't come to protect them, and the people had no ability to defend themselves because the government had already taken away the local militias. So the Assyrian Christians and all the communities, they were defenseless, and they were left basically at the whim of the ISIS fighters that came in with one tank, 50 men, and just took over village after village after village and slaughtered the people. I arrived in Iraq a couple of weeks later, and I remember sitting with the families that had lost their loved ones, that had walked miles, sometimes 50 miles, to get to safety. They were asking me, what can be done, what can be done? I can tell you the story of one woman that I met who had a gun put to her head and was told, you can go, but you need to leave your 4-year-old daughter behind. And so she had a choice. She could be killed, or she could leave her daughter behind to live, but to be a slave of these ISIS fighters. And I remember sitting with that woman and crying. And I was pregnant with my daughter at the time, and I can tell you, never one day did I go through my pregnancy or when my daughter was growing up not think about that woman and her little daughter. This is something that no mother should ever have to experience. My organization went into Iraq and we began to do a couple of things. We trained leaders across the society to defend religious freedom. We pushed back against a law in the courts that was going to force children to convert to Islam against their will. We worked with teachers in the areas that had fled from ISIS, and they were working in refugee camps in areas across northern Iraq, and we taught them about religious freedom. And we taught them how to use that to counter the ideas that ISIS was teaching, and to teach people that they could live with dignity and freedom simply by knowing their rights. When ISIS was finally pushed out of northern Iraq, these teachers went back into Mosul and Sinjar and the areas that were destroyed by ISIS, and they started working in the schools to fight back against that ideology and to change the way the children thought. I mean, those children were brainwashed, and they would be the next generation of ISIS if they didn't do something different, if they hadn't been taught another way. And now, because of that, these children have a future where they can hope for a different reality than the one that ISIS would have given them, which is just to be terrorists or to suffer violence. I was actually in Mosul recently, and when I was there, I got to visit one of the schools that was hosting a play based on religious freedom. And this isn't even something we teach in American schools, let alone in the Middle East, but these children were doing a play. It was so powerful to see their families cheer and clap for them and cry and realize that there was hope when people could be treated with dignity regardless of who they are, what they believe. And these children, Muslim children, were defending Christian children and Yazidi children. And for the first time, these minorities in Iraq had someone that was willing to defend them. That had never happened before. And that's the powerful transformation that took place in Iraq, and that really, when you look at the trillions that we've spent there with no pathway to victory, and I look at a less than $1 billion drop in the bucket of what we've been able to do and transform the society out of terrorism and extremism and break that cycle of violence, it gives me hope, but it also gives the people hope. I mean, the people of Iraq have suffered so much, but they want freedom, and they just don't know how to attain it. So we're able to help them find that pathway, and we can do it at a fraction of the cost of what we've spent in Iraq. And that, to me, is worth it, because we in America cannot stand to have terrorism running rampant around the world. What I've seen, though, is that when you teach children religious freedom, it changes them. and we're able to actually break that cycle of violence. So that's what I've been doing in Iraq. It's exciting because that model, the government in Iraq asked us to train all of their teachers. I was with the senior advisor to the King of Morocco, and he was saying, we want this here. So many other countries were saying, we want this here too, because we see that this is a way of challenging the extremism that's just spreading like a cancer throughout our societies. So it's really exciting. But look, when I worked for the US Congress and I worked on Iraq and I saw the writing on the wall and I saw that there was going to be a genocide, that it was not going to get better, throwing the same kind of solutions at it that we were, I knew that we had to do something different. And that's why I started my organization, to find a way of providing different kinds of solutions to get at the root cause of the problem. And that's what we did in Iraq, and it was effective. And that's why I know, as somebody that wants to run for Congress, there are better solutions, but we need people that are going there that have actually tested and applied and been successful at finding different solutions to problems. And that's the kind of background that I have that is very unique and different, and I'm excited to be able to bring that into Washington to change the way that Washington does business. Because the reality is, we are facing so many challenges in our own country related to religious freedom right now. When I go across our district, I see people being attacked on social media for their beliefs. I see communities that are attacked and unable to do business because they want to operate their business according to their beliefs and they're not able to. This is not what America was founded upon. If we don't have leaders that understand that cultural battle that's taking place and that can speak into it and fight for those values, even in difficult situations, then we lose those freedoms. One of my favorite quotes from President Reagan was that freedom isn't passed down in the bloodstream. It's something you have to be fought for and protected over every generation. That is the way to preserve freedom for the future, and that's what we've done in Iraq, we've done it in other countries, and I believe it's what we need to do here in America too. We need to be teaching the values that made this country great so that we don't lose them in future generations. I am Tina Ramirez, and I'm running for Congress in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. This is a seat formerly held by Dave Bratt, and it's one of the most important seats that we win back this year in order to regain the majority. So we are fighting hard and looking forward to taking back this seat for the party and for our conservative values.